Welcome to Sleepy Classic Tales. Today we're telling Master Flea by E.T.A. Hoffmann, published in the year 1822. It is a whimsical story from Frankfurt am Main about a shy eccentric, a tiny king in flight, and a gift that reveals more than any person should know. Make yourself comfortable, breathe calmly, and let yourself be carried into the night in which it all begins. Peregrinus Tyss was a man of 36, and he lived in Frankfurt am Main, in the house in which he had been born. His parents had been dead for years. The fortune of his father, a wealthy merchant, would have allowed him a brilliant life. But Peregrinus wanted nothing to do with it. He shunned people. Conversations with strangers embarrassed him. Gatherings he avoided altogether, and he was most at ease alone in his rooms, among his books and the things of his childhood. The household was kept for him by old Aline, who had served his mother before him, and who treated her master with a mixture of reverence and motherly strictness. One custom, however, was sacred to Peregrinus. Every year on Christmas Eve he bought the presents himself, toys, sweets, a small tree with candles, and set it all up in his room, just as his parents had once done for him. He gave himself the gifts, and when he had sat a while before the lights, he packed everything up again and carried it to a poor family, whose children then received the Christmas gifts that he had only borrowed for himself. So he did in this year too. He had given presents to the children of the bookbinder Lemmerhirt, had seen the happiness in their faces, and had walked home late in the evening through the cold lanes, contented and quiet. Then, at the door of an inn, a young woman stepped up to him. She was small and delicate. She wore a shining dress, and she called him by name, as though she had known him for years. She begged him to take her with him, home, to his house. She was in danger, and had no one in the world but him. Peregrinus stood there as if struck by lightning. He did not know this woman. In his life he had scarcely ever spoken with a woman younger than Aline. But before he could get out a word, she had already taken his arm, and her eyes looked at him with a brightness that went right through him. Her name, she said, was Dortje Elverdink. The stranger would not let go of his arm, and so Peregrinus led her through the quiet lanes to his house, bewildered, with a pounding heart, and the feeling of getting into something larger than himself. Aline threw up her hands when her master stood at the door at midnight with a beautiful young lady, but Dortje knew how to manage. She flattered the old woman, she praised the house, she settled into the rooms as though she were at home there, and within an hour she had both of them, master and servant, completely spun into her web. Peregrinus sat opposite her and scarcely dared to breathe. The stranger spoke of danger, of pursuers, of a prisoner he must hand over to her, and the longer she spoke, the less he understood. He possessed something, she said, that belonged to her, a fugitive, a tiny fugitive. She called him Master Flea. Peregrinus assured her that he had no flea, neither captive nor free, but Dortje only smiled and moved closer, and her nearness confused him so much that in the end he would have promised anything if she had asked it. In that instant he felt a fine sting on his neck, and a tiny voice, thin as the ringing of a glass, spoke close to his ear. It warned him. He should promise her nothing, nothing at all. She was beautiful, but she served dark purposes, and if he handed over the speaker, he was lost. Peregrinus started and looked around. No one was there but Dortje, who was watching him expectantly. He stammered that it was late, that they should speak further tomorrow, and all but fled from his own room. The strange lady spent the night in the guest room, and Peregrinus lay awake and listened for the thin voice, which did not speak again. In the morning, however, the haunting began anew. Dorcha begged, pleaded, wept. She clasped his knees. She called him her rescuer and her angel. And always it was about the one thing, about Master Flea, whom he was hiding. And while Peregrinus was still protesting that he knew nothing of it, the voice spoke up again at his ear and said that now the moment had come. Now they must speak openly with each other. He should bow the lady out and close the door. Peregrinus obeyed, half stunned. With difficulty and evasions he got Dorcha to leave him alone. Then he sat in his room, alone, as he believed, and waited for a voice out of nowhere. The voice did not keep him waiting long. On the table, in the middle of the white page of an open book, stood a flea. He was tiny, but as Peregrinus bent down he saw that the little creature stood on two legs, that it wore a small cloak and tiny golden boots, and that it looked at him out of clever eyes. It bowed and introduced itself. "Master Flea, ruler over the realm of the fleas, currently in flight." And then he told a story so whimsical that Peregrinus began to doubt his own reason. "The beautiful Dorcha Elverdink," said Master Flea, "was not at all what she seemed. Within her lived a princess from ancient times, Gamahe, the daughter of a king from a distant realm of flowers. Long ago she had been attacked by a wicked leech prince and had fallen into a death-like sleep. Two scholars had found her, two microscopists who peered with their lenses into the most hidden corners of nature, Leeuwenhoek and Swammerdam. With their arts they had brought the sleeping woman back to life, and ever since the two old men had quarreled bitterly over whom she belonged to, as though the princess were a specimen in their collection. But for life, Master Flea went on, one thing was still needed. Only as long as he himself, Master Flea, was near her and gave her a tiny sting at a certain hour, did she remain awake and young and beautiful. That was why they hunted him. Leeuwenhoek had kept him prisoner in a box like a convict, and the princess herself wanted him back in order to live forever. On Christmas night, his escape had succeeded, and chance, or something greater than chance, had made him leap into the collar of the very man who now granted him protection. Peregrinus listened and did not know what to believe, but the little creature spoke with such earnestness and such dignity that mistrust would have seemed indecent to him. He promised his protection. Master Flea bowed once more and said that one service was worth another. He would make his protector a gift such as no man on earth possessed. Into the pupil of his left eye he would set a tiny lens, a microscope, ground from the most secret arts of his people. Whoever looked through it would see, behind the brows of men, their true thoughts, fine and distinct, like the veins in a leaf. The next morning, Master Flea set the lens into his protector's eye. It happened in his sleep, and Peregrinus felt nothing but a fine itching in his left eye when he awoke. Then came the test. Aline brought breakfast, and while she was raving about the strange lady who was so beautiful and surely of high birth, Peregrinus looked for the first time through the lens. Above the old woman's brow, fine as gossamer, her thoughts lay openly revealed, and he read there that she had long since been planning a wedding, saw herself as housekeeper to a happy couple, and was quietly reckoning what such a position would bring her. Peregrinus was alarmed. Not about Aline, her thoughts were harmless enough, but about the thing itself. No person was hidden from him any longer. What he possessed there was too much for one man. How much too much it was he learned in the days that followed. Dorcha Elverdink was still living in his house, and when she looked at him with her dark eyes and told him she was fond of him, he read something else behind her brow. There was calculation. There was the one thought that governed everything: to get the prisoner back. at any price, and the shy man before her was the price she was prepared to pay. And yet, and this was the bewildering thing, between these cold thoughts there sometimes lay something warm, a flash of light that seemed to contradict her own self, as though she no longer knew where the cunning stopped and the feeling began. Peregrinus, who had never been able to see through a single person and now saw through everyone, was nearly driven out of his mind by it. There was a knock and a visitor entered, a gaunt old man with sharp eyes behind spectacles. He introduced himself as Leeuwenhoek, naturalist, and came straight to the point. The gentleman was harboring, he said, an escaped prisoner, his rightful property, a small, leaping thing. He demanded its surrender, otherwise other means would be found. While he spoke, Peregrinus read his thoughts, and what he saw there turned him cold. The old man took him for a fool who could be intimidated, and behind the threat stood naked greed, for with Master Flea stood and fell his power over the princess. Peregrinus, the shy Peregrinus, did something he would not have thought himself capable of the evening before. He answered calmly that he knew of no prisoner, and if the gentleman wished to threaten him, the door stood open. Leeuwenhoek left with a bow in which there was no courtesy. On the stairs, as Peregrinus still read on his way out, he was already beginning to spin a new plan. Scarcely was Leeuwenhoek gone when Peregrinus received his next visitor, and this one was more welcome. George Pepusch was a friend from his youth who had long lived in distant lands and was now back in Frankfurt, a lean, vehement man with a dark face who spoke quickly and grew angry quickly. Peregrinus was glad, but the gladness was short-lived, for Pepusch came not as a friend, but as a man possessed. He had heard, he burst out, that a lady was living in this house, a small, delicate person who called herself Dortje Elverdink. This lady belonged to him. He loved her. He had loved her for a span longer than a human life could reach, and if his old playmate stood in his way, the friendship was at an end, and something else would begin. Peregrinus read behind his friend's brow, and what he saw bewildered him more deeply than anything before. For there burned the same old story that Master Flea had told, only from the other side. In Pepusch there lived, as the princess lived in Dortje, another, older being, the thistle Zeherit, a proud growth from that distant realm of flowers, who had once loved the Princess Gamaheh and had defeated the Leech Prince in battle. Two ancient souls had strayed into two Frankfurt citizens and were continuing their story there, without the citizens rightly knowing what was happening to them. Peregrinus assured his friend that he did not desire the lady, that she had come to him like a stray cat, and that he wanted nothing but to have his peace back. Pepusch half believed him, raged a while longer, and stormed off to look for Dortje, who, as it turned out, had long since slipped out of the house. She had returned to Leeuwenhoek, then gone again. She appeared at Peregrinus's and vanished once more, and around her a strange struggle began. For now the second microscopist came onto the scene as well, Swammerdam, Leeuwenhoek's old enemy. The two scholars who had once together brought the princess back to life fought each other with all the arts of their science, and whoever saw them come to blows in the street, wielding telescopes like rapiers, took them for two mad old men. But Peregrinus stood between all parties. Everyone wanted something from him, everyone lied to him, and he saw every lie. Only one did not lie. The tiny guest in his collar, who quietly advised him in the evenings to stand firm and not to set his heart on the wrong woman. Into the middle of this confusion fell a blow that no one had seen coming. One morning there was a hard knock at the door, and men of the court came in. Peregrinus Tyss was arrested. They led him away, through the lanes, past the neighbors who looked out from their windows, and no one told him what he was supposed to have done. Behind the affair stood a man named Canarpanti, a court counselor from a small principality who was staying in Frankfurt and sought to make himself important. This Canarpanti had gotten wind of the fact that on Christmas night a gentleman had led a young lady into his house, and out of that he had spun a case, an abduction, a crime, a criminal. That no lady was missing, that no one had filed a complaint, that there was no victim, troubled him little. He declared that the crime would turn up soon enough once one had the criminal, and that one need only look sharply enough into the arrested man's papers and into his thoughts, and then it would appear that he had done something wicked, for everyone had done something. Peregrinus's letters and notebooks were confiscated, and Canarpanti set about searching them, word by word. If he found the word night in a letter, he underlined it, for abductions happened at night. If he found a tender sentence, he underlined it twice, for tenderness pointed to passion, and passion to crime. So out of nothing a mountain of files grew, and Canarpanti carried it before him like a proof. But the Frankfurt judges were level-headed people. They questioned Peregrinus, and he told them calmly and truthfully how it had been, that the lady had spoken to him in the street, that she had gone with him of her own free will, that she had lived in his house like a guest and had left whenever it pleased her. Aline confirmed every word, and when the lady herself was questioned, Dortje Elverdink declared with the sweetest smile that she knew nothing of any abduction, that Herr Tyss had been kindness itself. Canarpanti's edifice collapsed in on itself. The judges acquitted Peregrinus, and soon the whole city was laughing at the court counselor and his underlined words, until he preferred to depart. Peregrinus returned to his house, exhausted and richer by one experience. He had seen that even without a magic lens, in some heads there was nothing to read but vanity and malice. At home, however, the old confusions were waiting, and a new one besides. For in the house of the bookbinder Lammerhurt, he had seen a girl again, Rüschen, the daughter, quiet and clear, and her image would not leave his mind. Rüschen Lammerhurt had scarcely caught his notice before, a child among the bookbinder's children, but now she was 19. And when Peregrinus came to the house after his release, and she gave him her hand and told him with honest joy how much the family had feared for him, then something happened to him that was different from everything Dortje had worked in him. No reeling, no confusion, but a quiet warmth that stayed. In the following weeks he kept finding new reasons to visit the bookbinder, and every time he sat facing Rüschen, he felt the temptation in his left eye. He would only have had to look. One glance through the lens and he would know what she thought of him, whether behind her friendliness something else lay hidden, calculation, pity, indifference. But Peregrinus did not do it. He understood, without anyone telling him, that this one glance would destroy everything. Whoever reads a person's thoughts can no longer trust that person. He can only control them, and love, he dimly felt, begins precisely where one gives up the proof. So he sat, facing Rüschen, looked into her eyes instead of behind her brow, and let the lens rest. Master Flea, who watched it all in the evenings, told him that now he was near the secret for whose sake the lens had been given to him. Dortje Elverdink, meanwhile, made one last attempt. She came back, more beautiful than ever. She wept real tears. And when Peregrinus looked through the lens, he found her thoughts this time in a strange turmoil. For the ancient princess within her wanted eternal life, But the Frankfurt girl, which she also was, had begun truly to love the kind man, and both wills tugged at each other so that it was a pity to see. She offered him everything, her hand, her life, if only he would hand over Master Flea. For a moment Peregrinus wavered, for her distress was real. Then he said quietly that he could not buy what must be given freely, and that he could not betray the one he was protecting. Dorcha looked at him a long while, and in her thoughts anger and respect read strangely into one another. She went, and this time she did not come back to him, but turned to where the old story drew her, to Pepusch, in whom the thistle Zeherit awaited her, her betrothed from a time before all time. And Peregrinus went that same evening to the bookbinder and asked for Huschen's hand, with a faltering voice and without a single glance through the lens. And Huschen said yes, and her eyes said it too. In the spring, the wedding was held, and it was a double one, for Pepusch too led his bride to the altar, Dorcha Elverdink, who had now found where she belonged. At the feast, the two couples sat together, and whoever saw them might have thought all the confusions were forgotten. But with Pepusch and Dorcha, it came to a whimsical end. On their wedding night, both vanished from the house, and no one ever saw them again. In the garden, however, something was found in the morning that had not been there before. A tall, strange cactus that had bloomed in that single night, and wound around its stem a tulip, and both had withered together. The ancient souls, the thistle Zeherit and the Princess Gamaheh, had cast off their human garments and returned to their realm of flowers, united, as had been ordained for them before all time. But Peregrinus and Huschen remained, and their happiness was of the quiet, lasting kind. The two microscopists lost, along with the princess, the object of their quarrel. Leuwenhoek and Swammerdam, cheated of the prize for which they had fought a lifetime, reconciled of necessity, and turned their lenses thereafter back to beetles and drops of water, with which they did less harm. Master Flea was free. The service that had bound him to the princess was ended, and his people called him back to the throne. But he did not forget his protector. He took the lens back out of Peregrinus's eye, for it had fulfilled its purpose, and Peregrinus gave it up without regret. In that 1 year he had read more thoughts than a man can bear, and the best thing he possessed he had found without the lens. Every year, however, on Christmas night, Master Flea appeared again, tiny and dignified in his golden boots, and brought gifts such as no merchant in the city could have supplied. And when, after a year, a son was born in the old house, the little king sat on the cradle and kept watch. Peregrinus Tyss, who had once shunned people, now walked with an open face through the lanes of Frankfurt, greeted and was greeted, and when he sat in the evening with Huschen at the window and the lights came on below, he sometimes thought that the most wondrous thing had not come to him through the magic lens, but on a winter evening when he had opened the door to a stranger in need. That was our short retelling of Master Flea by E.T.A. Hoffmann, a story about a man who could read every thought and came to understand that trust is worth more than knowledge. Good night, and if you like, we'll hear each other again tomorrow at Sleepy Classic Tales.